Everyone remembers the enormous tractors that pulled plows across the Great Plains. They know about the diesel revolution that changed farming forever. But what if I told you that, buried deep in the wheat fields of Montana, there once sat a single machine so powerful, so impossibly massive, that it redefined what agricultural equipment could achieve? This wasn't just another tractor. This was a landship, a diesel-powered cathedral of American ambition that pushed engineering to its absolute limit. It weighed more than a fully loaded semi-truck. Its engine displaced over 24 liters, and for decades, it held a title that seemed untouchable, the most powerful harvester ever built. But here's the kicker. Most people have never heard of it. The machine I'm talking about is the Big Bud 747, and its story isn't just about horsepower and torque. It's about what happens when American farmers dream so big that the rest of the world has no choice but to watch in awe. This is the story of how one family's impossible vision became a legend on steel tracks, and why, even today, nothing has ever quite matched what they created. To understand the Big Bud 747, you have to go back to the heart of Montana in the early 1970s. This was a time when American agriculture was changing fast. Farms were getting bigger, fields stretched for miles in every direction, and the old tractors, even the biggest ones from John Deere and International Harvester, were starting to show their limits. Farmers needed more power, more weight, more pulling capacity. They needed machines that could work dawn to dusk without breaking down, that could handle implements weighing tens of thousands of pounds, that could turn soil so hard it felt like concrete. But the manufacturers weren't building what they needed. Not yet. Enter the Rossi family of Havre, Montana. They weren't engineers in the traditional sense. They were farmers and custom operators who understood the land and the machines that worked it better than anyone else. And in 1977, they made a decision that would change agricultural history. They partnered with Big Bud Tractors, a small company in Havre that specialized in building custom four-wheel drive tractors for farmers who needed something beyond what the big brands could offer. Together, they set out to build the biggest, most powerful tractor the world had ever seen. Not because it was easy, not because it made sense on paper, but because the land demanded it, and they had the passion to make it happen. The Montana landscape itself played a crucial role in this story. The northern Great Plains present challenges that farmers in other regions simply don't face. The growing season is short, brutally compressed into a few critical months. When conditions are right for planting or harvesting, you have to move fast, because weather windows don't last. The soil varies wildly from field to field. In some areas, you're dealing with rich black loam that's been building fertility for centuries. In others, you're working hard-pan clay that's been baked by the summer sun into something approaching concrete, and the distances are staggering. A single farming operation might span 20 or 30,000 acres, with fields separated by miles of prairie. Moving equipment between job sites could eat up entire days. This meant that farmers needed machines that could do the work of multiple tractors, that could operate efficiently across vast distances, and that could handle whatever soil conditions they encountered without constant adjustments or breakdowns. The major manufacturers were building tractors for the average American farmer. But Montana farmers weren't average, and the Rossis knew that to farm on the scale they envisioned, they needed something exceptional. Big Bud Tractors had been around since the late 1960s, founded by Ron Harmon and Robert Dougherty. They started small, building tractors in the 150 to 250 horsepower range for local farmers. But they had a reputation for quality and customization. If you needed something specific, something the major manufacturers wouldn't touch, Big Bud would build it for you. Their tractors were known for their durability, their simplicity, and their sheer pulling power. They used heavy-duty components, articulated frames for better maneuverability, and diesel engines from trusted suppliers like Detroit Diesel and Cummins. By the mid-1970s, Big Bud had built a loyal following among custom operators and large-scale farmers across Montana, North Dakota, and beyond. The company operated out of a modest facility in Havre, a small town on Montana's Highline. The stretch of highway and railroad that runs just south of the Canadian border Havre wasn't a manufacturing hub or a center of agricultural innovation in the traditional sense, but it was surrounded by some of the most challenging farmland in America And that meant the people there understood what real farming demanded. Big Bud's engineers and fabricators were farmers themselves or came from farming families. They knew that theoretical designs meant nothing if they couldn't survive a Montana spring or a Dakota harvest season. But the Rossi family wanted something different. They weren't looking for a standard tractor. They were farming tens of thousands of acres, and they needed a machine that could pull the biggest deep tillage equipment available. They needed something that could work 24 hours a day during the critical spring and fall seasons. They needed power that wouldn't quit. So they approached Big Bud with a challenge. Build us the most powerful tractor you can possibly make. No compromises, no shortcuts, just raw, unrelenting power. And Big Bud said yes. The partnership between the Rossis and Big Bud was built on mutual respect and shared understanding. The Rossis knew exactly what they needed because they'd been fighting the land for years. Big Bud knew exactly how to build it because they'd been solving similar problems, albeit on a smaller scale, for nearly a decade. Together, they began sketching out specifications that would have seemed insane to most equipment designers: 700 horsepower, 100,000 pounds, tracks instead of tires, a 16-cylinder engine. Every time they wrote down a new number, it seemed more impossible. But they kept pushing because they knew that anything less wouldn't be enough. The first step was finding an engine. Not just any engine, but something that could deliver the kind of output the Rossis demanded. Big Bud turned to Detroit Diesel, one of America's premier diesel engine manufacturers. Detroit Diesel had a reputation for building engines that could run forever in the toughest conditions, from over-the-road trucks to industrial generators, marine applications to heavy construction equipment. And they had just the engine for the job: the 16V71. This was a monster, a 16-cylinder, two-stroke diesel engine arranged in a V configuration. It displaced 1,136 cubic inches, or just over 24 liters. It was turbocharged and after-cooled, meaning it forced massive amounts of compressed air into the combustion chambers, creating power levels that seemed almost unbelievable for a tractor. In its agricultural configuration, the 16V71 produced 760 horsepower at 2,100 revolutions per minute. But that wasn't even the most impressive number. The torque output was staggering: 2,500 foot-pounds. That's the kind of pulling force you'd associate with a locomotive, not a farm tractor. To put that in perspective, most large tractors of the era made between 300 and 400 horsepower. The Big Bud 747 was nearly doubling that. It was entering territory no agricultural machine had ever reached before. The Detroit Diesel 16V71 had a fascinating history of its own. The 71 series engines, so named because each cylinder displaced 71 cubic inches, had been powering American industry since the 1930s. They were used in everything from city buses to landing craft during World War II. General Motors, which owned Detroit Diesel, had refined the design over decades, and by the 1970s, these engines were legendary for their reliability and power. The two-stroke design meant that every cylinder fired on every revolution of the crankshaft, rather than every other revolution like a four-stroke engine. This gave the engine a distinctive sound and an incredible power-to-weight ratio. It also meant the engine required a blower to force air into the cylinders during the scavenging process. The 16V71 used a massive roots-type blower mounted in the valley between the cylinder banks, and when combined with the turbocharger, it could move enormous volumes of air. This engine wasn't just powerful, it was sophisticated, with components engineered to withstand forces that would destroy lesser designs. Each piston was forged aluminum, designed to handle the intense heat and pressure of forced induction. The crankshaft was a massive piece of forged steel, balanced to perfection and supported by multiple main bearings. The fuel injection system used Detroit Diesel's unit injector design, where each cylinder had its own dedicated injector that combined the high-pressure pump and spray nozzle in one unit. This meant fuel delivery was precise, consistent, and reliable, even after hundreds of thousands of miles. But raw power was only part of the equation. To handle that much torque, Big Bud had to engineer a drivetrain that could survive years of brutal fieldwork. They designed a massive planetary gear system that transferred power from the engine to all four wheels. The transmission itself was a marvel of engineering. It featured multiple forward speeds and reverse gears, all designed to handle the full torque output of that Detroit diesel engine without slipping or braking. The clutch was enormous, with friction surfaces that could engage smoothly, despite the tremendous forces involved. From the transmission, power flowed through heavy-duty drive shafts to the front and rear axles. These weren't ordinary tractor axles. They were custom-fabricated units built to handle loads that would snap conventional components like twigs. Each axle housing was constructed from thick-wall steel tubing, reinforced at stress points, and filled with high-capacity bearings and gears. The tractor used an articulated frame, meaning it bent in the middle for steering, rather than using traditional front-wheel steering. This gave it incredible maneuverability for such a large machine, and distributed weight more evenly across all 4 tracks. The articulation joint was a massive pin and bushing arrangement that allowed the front and rear halves of the tractor to pivot relative to each other while still transferring pulling forces efficiently. Hydraulic cylinders on either side of the articulation point controlled the steering, and the system was designed with enough mechanical advantage that even at full load, the operator could steer the tractor with minimal effort. Yes, tracks. The Big Bud 747 didn't ride on tires. It sat on 4 enormous rubber tracks, each one over 3 feet wide. These tracks spread the tractor's weight, which topped out at around 100,000 pounds, across a huge surface area. That meant it could work in wet, muddy conditions without sinking, and it could cross soft soil without compacting it nearly as much as a wheeled tractor. Wood soil compaction is one of the hidden enemies of modern agriculture. When heavy equipment crushes the soil structure, it reduces pore space, limits water infiltration, and restricts root growth. Over time, compaction can significantly reduce crop yields. By spreading its weight across such a large area, the Big Bud actually exerted less ground pressure per square inch than many smaller wheeled tractors. This meant it could work fields in conditions that would bog down conventional equipment, and it could do so without damaging the long-term productivity of the soil. The tracks themselves were engineering marvels. Each one consisted of reinforced rubber with embedded steel cables for strength and durability. They ran on massive drive sprockets at the rear and idler wheels at the front, with multiple road wheels supporting the weight along the length of the track. The track tension could be adjusted to optimize performance for different soil conditions, and the entire track system was designed to be serviceable in the field with basic tools. The tracks also gave it incredible traction. With all that weight and power going to the ground through 4 contact patches, the Big Bud could pull implements that weighed as much as 40,000 pounds through soil so heavy it would stop lesser tractors dead in their tracks. It was built to survive anything. 7 main bearings in the drivetrain, heavy-duty axles rated for loads far beyond what most equipment ever saw, a cooling system designed to handle the heat generated by running at full throttle for hours on end. That cooling system deserves special mention because keeping a 760 horsepower diesel engine cool in the Montana summer heat was no small feat. Big Bud installed a radiator that was nearly as large as the one you'd find in a highway truck, with multiple cores and high-capacity fans driven directly off the engine. The coolant capacity was measured in dozens of gallons, and the system included a heavy-duty water pump that could circulate that coolant fast enough to keep temperatures stable, even during the most demanding work. The hydraulic system was equally impressive. The Big Bud needed hydraulic power for steering, for raising and lowering implements, and for controlling various functions on the equipment it pulled. Big Bud designed a hydraulic system with multiple pumps driven off the engine, high-capacity reservoirs, and heavy-duty valves that could handle the flow rates and pressures required. Everything about this machine was overbuilt because Big Bud knew that out in the Montana wheat fields, failure wasn't an option. When the Big Bud 747 rolled off the line in 1977, it was nothing short of spectacular. The tractor measured over 27 feet long and 14 feet wide. It stood over 14 feet tall at the top of the exhaust stack. The cab, perched high above the ground, offered a commanding view of the fields ahead. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable for a machine of its era. Adjustable seat, climate control, good visibility in all directions. The cab was insulated against noise and vibration, making it possible for operators to work long shifts without the fatigue that came from exposure to engine roar and mechanical vibration. The controls were straightforward: throttle, gear selector, steering wheel, and instrumentation to monitor engine temperature, oil pressure, and fuel levels. Big Bud designed the control layout to be intuitive, so operators familiar with conventional tractors could adapt quickly to the Big Bud's unique characteristics. The visibility from the cab was exceptional. Positioned high above the ground and forward of the engine, the operator could see the implement behind the tractor as well as the terrain ahead. This was crucial for precision work, allowing the operator to follow field contours, avoid obstacles, and ensure consistent implement depth across varying soil conditions. Starting the 16V71 was an experience in itself. The engine had a distinct two-stroke sound, a deep, rhythmic rumble that was unlike anything else in agriculture. When you turned the key, the starter motor would crank that massive engine, and within seconds, you'd hear the first cylinders fire. Then the blower would kick in, and the engine would settle into its characteristic idle, a sound that was part mechanical symphony, part distant thunder. When you pushed the throttle forward and felt all 760 horses come to life, when you felt the ground shake beneath those massive tracks, you knew you were operating something special. And the Rossi family put it to work immediately. From day one, the Big Bud 747 was a working machine, not a showpiece. It was put to the test in some of the most demanding agricultural conditions imaginable, and it proved itself beyond anyone's expectations. The Big Bud 747 spent its working life doing exactly what it was built to do: deep tillage work across thousands upon thousands of acres. It pulled chisel plows, disc harrows, and cultivators that would have required 2 or even 3 conventional tractors to handle. Deep tillage is exactly what it sounds like, working the soil to depths of 12, 18, even 24 inches to break up hardpan layers, improve drainage, and incorporate crop residue. This is backbreaking work for any machine. The implement has to penetrate deep into the soil, break it apart, and lift it without getting stuck or breaking. The tractor has to provide enough pulling force to keep the implement moving at a consistent speed, regardless of changes in soil density or moisture content. And it has to do this for hours on end, across hundreds of acres, without overheating, breaking down, or losing performance. The Big Bud did all of this effortlessly. Operators reported that even with massive implements in tow, the tractor never seemed to struggle. The Detroit diesel engine would settle into a steady rhythm. The tracks would bite into the soil, and the Big Bud would just pull hour after hour, leaving perfectly worked soil in its wake. It worked spring and fall, often running around the clock with different operators taking shifts. During spring planting season, when every day of good weather counted, the Big Bud would run 24 hours a day, stopping only for fuel and the quick maintenance checks. Operators would work 8 or 12-hour shifts and then hand the controls over to the next person. The tractor would run continuously for weeks, covering hundreds of acres each day, preparing seed beds for wheat, barley, and other crops. In the fall, after harvest, it would be back in the fields, doing tillage work to prepare for the next season, and it never quit. Month after month, year after year, the Big Bud proved itself. The Rossis kept meticulous maintenance records, and what they showed was remarkable. Despite the brutal workload, the Big Bud required no major repairs during its first several years of operation. Regular oil changes, filter replacements, and minor adjustments were all it needed. The Detroit diesel engine, famous for its durability, lived up to its reputation. The drivetrain components, all overbuilt to handle forces far beyond what they'd see in normal operation, showed minimal wear. The tracks, inspected regularly, wore evenly, and lasted far longer than conventional tires would have under similar conditions. Farmers and custom operators from across the region came to see it in action, amazed at how effortlessly it could pull through hardpan soil that brought other machines to their knees. It became something of a legend in Montana agricultural circles. People talked about the Big Bud the way they talked about mythical creatures they'd heard stories, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The sound alone was unforgettable. That deep Detroit diesel rumble echoed across the fields, a mechanical symphony that signaled serious work was being done. You could hear it from miles away on a calm day, and farmers working nearby fields would stop and watch as the Big Bud crawled across the horizon. And the sight of it, crawling across the horizon with a massive implement in tow, leaving perfectly worked soil in its wake, was something that stayed with you. This was American agricultural engineering at its absolute peak. No compromises, no apologies, just raw, purposeful power designed to conquer the land. Visitors to the Rossi operation would often ask to ride along in the cab, and those who did came away with stories they'd tell for decades. The feeling of sitting that high above the ground, controlling that much power, watching the landscape roll by as the Big Bud devoured acre after acre, it was an experience that changed how people thought about what agricultural equipment could be. But the Big Bud 747 wasn't just impressive in the fields. It represented a philosophy of farming that was uniquely American. After World War II, American agriculture had shifted toward bigger operations, more mechanization, and higher efficiency. The family farm was giving way to large-scale commercial operations. Farmers were investing in bigger equipment to work more acres with fewer workers. This wasn't about greed. It was about survival. Land costs were rising. Labor was expensive and hard to find. Commodity prices were volatile, subject to global markets and weather patterns beyond any farmer's control. The only way to stay profitable was to increase scale and efficiency, and that meant bigger machines. The economics were straightforward but unforgiving. If you could work 10,000 acres efficiently, you had a better chance of weathering bad years than if you only worked 1,000. If you could plant and harvest quickly, you could take advantage of narrow weather windows and get your crop in or out before conditions turned. And if you could do deep tillage work that improved your soil structure and drainage, you could increase yields and reduce inputs over time. These were the calculations that drove farmers to invest in machines like the Big Bud, even though the upfront cost was staggering. The Big Bud 747 was the ultimate expression of that philosophy. It was a machine built for farmers who thought in terms of tens of thousands of acres, not hundreds. It was designed for operations where downtime meant losing entire growing seasons. It was engineered for people who understood that sometimes you have to build something yourself because nobody else will. And in that sense, the Big Bud became more than just a tractor. It became a symbol of American agricultural ambition, a testament to what could be achieved when necessity met ingenuity and someone was willing to take the risk. The Rossis had put their faith and their money into an unproven machine built by a small company in rural Montana. They could have bought multiple conventional tractors for the same investment. They could have stuck with proven technology and played it safe. But they understood that playing it safe meant staying small. And staying small meant eventually getting pushed out of farming altogether. So they took the risk, and it paid off in ways that went far beyond simple economics. For nearly 3 decades, the Big Bud 747 worked the fields of Montana. It became part of the landscape, as much a fixture as the grain elevators and railroad lines that defined rural America. Children grew up seeing it work the fields near their homes. Young farmers learned the trade, watching it prepare seedbeds and work stubble. Photographers and journalists sought it out, documenting this mechanical marvel for magazines and newspapers. The Big Bud appeared in agricultural publications, featured in articles about the future of farming and the evolution of farm equipment. It became a point of pride for Montana agriculture, proof that innovation wasn't limited to Silicon Valley or Detroit. Sometimes the most important innovations happened in small towns on the Great Plains, where people who understood the land found solutions to problems that engineers in distant cities couldn't even imagine. The Big Bud represented that spirit of local innovation, of farmers and fabricators working together to create something that served their specific needs, rather than waiting for distant corporations to catch up. But as the 1990s arrived, the agricultural world was changing again. Technology was advancing. Computerized controls, GPS guidance, and precision agriculture were becoming standard. Newer tractors were more efficient, more comfortable, and easier to maintain. John Deere introduced their 8620, a conventional tractor with nearly 500 horsepower Case IH, launched the Steiger Quadtrac series, which combined articulated steering with track systems and modern electronics. These machines represented the new generation of super tractors, built by major manufacturers with worldwide distribution networks and advanced engineering resources. They offered features the Big Bud couldn't match: electronic monitoring systems that tracked every aspect of engine and drivetrain performance, GPS auto steer that could drive straighter rows than any human operator, variable rate application systems that could adjust fertilizer and seed rates on the fly based on soil conditions. And while the Big Bud was still mechanically sound, it was starting to show its age. Parts for the Detroit Diesel 16V71 were getting harder to find. Detroit Diesel had moved on to newer engine designs. And while the 71 series was still supported, components were increasingly expensive and slow to obtain. The tractor's sheer size made it difficult to transport between job sites. Most roads and bridges were designed for loads of 40,000 pounds or less, and moving a 100,000-pound tractor required special permits, pilot vehicles, and careful route planning. And the economics of farming had shifted in ways that made owning such a specialized machine less practical. Custom operators were facing pressure from farmers who now owned their own large tractors. The days when a single custom operator with unique equipment could command premium rates were fading as technology became more widely distributed. Additionally, changes in farming practices were reducing the demand for deep tillage. Minimum till and no-till farming methods were gaining popularity as farmers recognized the benefits of leaving crop residue on the surface to reduce erosion and build soil organic matter. These methods required different equipment, lighter, more precise implements rather than massive chisel plows. The Big Bud, designed specifically for deep tillage work, was finding fewer opportunities to do what it did best. In 2006, the Rossi family made the difficult decision to sell the Big Bud 747. It wasn't because the tractor had failed them. It was simply time. The machine had given them everything they'd asked for and more. It had worked hundreds of thousands of acres, survived 3 decades of Montana weather, and never let them down when they needed it most. But nothing in agriculture lasts forever, and even legends eventually have to pass the torch. The buyer was a farming operation in northern Montana that saw value in preserving this piece of history, while still putting it to work. They restored the Big Bud, gave it a fresh coat of paint in its distinctive yellow and green livery, and continued using it for seasonal work. But they also understood what they had. Not just a tractor, but a rolling piece of American agricultural heritage. They began bringing it to farm shows and exhibitions, where it drew crowds of enthusiasts eager to see this legendary machine in person. The restoration work was extensive and careful. Every system was inspected and refurbished. The Detroit diesel engine was gone through completely, with new seals, gaskets, and wear components installed. The fuel injection system was rebuilt. The cooling system was flushed and pressure tested. The hydraulic system received new hoses, seals, and filters. The tracks were inspected and replaced where necessary. Inside the cab, the seat was reupholstered, gauges were refurbished, and the controls were cleaned and lubricated. The goal wasn't to turn it into a museum piece, but to ensure it could continue working and running for years to come, while also looking its best when representing Montana agricultural heritage at public events. Over the years, the Big Bud 747 has become a celebrity in farming circles. It's been featured in documentaries, magazines, and agricultural shows. Enthusiasts travel from across the country just to see it in person, to hear that Detroit diesel rumble one more time, to marvel at the sheer audacity of its design. In 2009, it was recognized by Guinness World Records as the world's largest tractor, a title it earned not through publicity stunts, but through honest work in the fields. The recognition brought renewed attention to the Big Bud and to the story of its creation. Suddenly, people who'd never heard of Havre, Montana, or Big Bud tractors were learning about this remarkable machine and the people who built it. The Guinness recognition sparked documentaries and feature articles, bringing the Big Bud story to audiences far beyond the agricultural community. And while newer, more powerful tractors have been built since then, none have quite captured the imagination the way the Big Bud has. There's something about its story, about the fact that it was built by a small company in Montana for a family that simply needed more power, that resonates with people. It wasn't built by a corporate giant. It wasn't designed by a team of engineers in a sterile laboratory. It was built by people who understood farming, who listened to what the land demanded, and who had the courage to build something nobody else thought was possible. Today, the Big Bud 747 still runs. It's been meticulously maintained, its Detroit diesel engine kept in perfect condition. Whenever that 16-cylinder engine roars to life and the ground begins to shake, people are transported back to a time when American agriculture was defined by boldness and innovation. The legacy of the Big Bud 747 extends far beyond its own impressive specifications. It inspired a generation of agricultural engineers to think differently about power and scale. It showed farmers that custom solutions built specifically for their needs could outperform mass-produced equipment. And it demonstrated that small companies with big ideas could compete with industry giants. Big Bud tractors eventually ceased operations, but their influence lived on. The principles they pioneered, articulated frames, massive horsepower, and customer-specific customization, became standard in the four-wheel drive tractor market today. Manufacturers like John Deere, Case IH, and New Holland all build tractors in the 500 to 700 horsepower range. Machines that would have seemed impossible in the 1970s. They owe a debt to pioneers like Big Bud, who proved that such power levels were not only possible but practical. The Big Bud also helped establish Montana as a center of agricultural innovation. The state's unique combination of vast acreage, challenging soil conditions, and independent-minded farmers created an environment where radical ideas could flourish. And that spirit continues today, with Montana farmers and engineers still pushing the boundaries of what agricultural equipment can achieve. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Big Bud 747 is what it represents to the people who remember it. For farmers who worked alongside it, it's a reminder of an era when men and machines worked in harmony to tame some of the toughest land on Earth. For equipment enthusiasts, it's the ultimate example of American mechanical ingenuity, a machine built without compromise or apology. So, here's my question for you. Have you ever seen the Big Bud 747 in person? What's your favorite memory of these incredible machines? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this forgotten chapter of American agricultural history, subscribe for more legends that shaped our world.